What's up, Rebel Nation? It's Cam Wicker from the Rebel Walk, co-host of the podcast that you're tuned into right now, the Rebel Talk. In today's episode, Zach and I will be breaking down the recent week of Ole Miss sports while also previewing the next week in Ole Miss sports. This podcast will be broken down into three sections: men's basketball, women's basketball, and baseball. Feel free to skip through the episode if you like or watch the whole thing. With that being said, thanks for tuning in and enjoy the show. Welcome back, Rebel fans. You're listening to another episode of the Rebel Talk presented by the Rebel Walk. I'm Cam Wicker, and as always, I'm here with Zach Moreth. Today, we're here to talk a little bit about Ole Miss sports from the recent week. Also, going to preview a little bit of what Ole Miss has to come and talk a little bit of women's basketball, men's basketball, and baseball. It's been an interesting couple of weeks for Ole Miss, to say the least, Zach, especially on the basketball side, kind of up and down for both women's and men's basketball. And then baseball red hot right now. We won't talk too much about softball, but if you guys have been watching softball, they just took down Arkansas. They just took on Arkansas in the first week of SEC play. Arkansas was ranked 10th in the country. Ole Miss was ranked 25th. So look for softball to be on the way up right now. They got that new stadium. Looking for some fans to come out there and support them in that big stadium they got now. And they're looking pretty hot. They got a couple some stars on that team that they're looking to build off with, and a lot of young players on that team too on softball that they're looking to build with. But we won't harp too much on that today. Maybe in a different podcast we can talk a little bit about that a little bit more at some point. But first off the bat, I want to talk a little bit of women's basketball, Zach. And if you've been watching women's basketball, if you've been watching Team 50, it's been a collective kind of go at this thing for this team. There hasn't been really any standouts. I know Maddie Scott wants to be that standout player, and Coach Yo wants Maddie Scott to be that standout player, and she is at times. Going back to that first round, or that round 2 game against Mississippi State in their first matchup in the SEC tourney, when they beat State for the second time this season, Maddie Scott combined for 50 points in those 2 games. She had 20 in that game. KK Deans is starting to heat up a little bit for Ole Miss too. Kennedy Todd Williams is starting to come into her own on really the offensive side of the ball. Is kind of struggling early in the year, kind of not making as much shots as she wanted to early in the year, making a little bit more shots now. And I think the big question for Ole Miss right now is Team 50 hot at the right time, Zach?
To me, the answer is yes, Cam. And, a lot of this goes into how much does experience and, team chemistry matter when it comes down to these down-to-the-wire games that happen in March. And when you look at Kennedy Todd Williams, Maddie Scott, KK Deans, and Coach Yo kind of collecting this group full of all sorts of different talent, I think it's there. If you remember last year, they played a very competitive game. I want to say it was Notre Dame in March Madness, one of the best women's teams in the country. And to me, they've taken that next step forward. To Texas, they only lose by 7. But again, they're competitive in almost every game. They go down to Baton Rouge at the end of the regular season to prove they can take down a big time opponent on the road. So, the tangibles are there. The intangibles need to work themselves out relatively quickly, though, because look, it's one and done from this point on. But hopefully, good things are going to happen. I'm sorry if you can hear my roommates yelling in the background. They're betting on some games, so just let that be. But again, dude, the win over State, Coach Yo seriously owns Mississippi State in the postseason, it feels like. So that's incredible work to her. But we said it all year, Cam. Sky's the limit. Who's going to rise up? Who's going to be that player for Ole Miss to take them past, whatever round it may be, second round, Sweet 16? This team can make a run. They have all the making to do so. I get a very similar vibe from them and the men's. It's just, who's going to be the face of March Madness, who's going to be on those highlight reels, and hopefully we find that out in a positive way.
Absolutely. And I like Zach said, I think Ole Miss is going to find out who's going to be that person to step up for him. I mean, KK Dean's averaging 15 points a game. Really down the stretch here, I think it's past 6 games. She's probably averaging that. Had 20 in that game against Texas, where Ole Miss was down, I believe, about 15 points at one point. Then all of a sudden you look up and it's a 4-point game, and KK Dean should hit her 5th 3. So, I mean, when she's hot, she's hot. I mean, when she's off, she's off. But when she's making shots, she has a lot of confidence. She's going to keep taking those shots. And if Ole Miss can instill that confidence in other players, some of their younger players like Sierra Chinu, Christina Walla, they can get those girls going. I think they have a real shot at doing what they did a couple of years ago, knocking off Stanford in that game in the round of 32 in that one.
Right.
To the Sweet 16. This team can make that push again and get past that first round round and second round, especially, which brings me to my next question. Is you have a chance to host in Oxford this year. You have a chance, according to Charlie Cream, to host in Oxford this year. And that just makes me pose the question, how important is it for not only Ole Miss and Coach Yo in this program, but how important it is for the city of Oxford and for the university to host a playoff game in Oxford? I think it's been since 1992 since Ole Miss had a regional in the NCAA tournament here. Haven't had one in football yet. They were pushing for one this year. You thought you were going to get a playoff game here this year. You've had a couple in baseball and some regional games here in Oxford, but you haven't had that pavilion packed out yet. I mean, that was back when the Tad Pad was still a thing, when Ole Miss was hosting playoff games back then. And if you can get the pavilion packed up for some playoff games, it's going to be an electric atmosphere. We've seen how the pavilion can get when it gets loud. And I think this Ole Miss team is built to make a push after you can get, if you can get through that Oxford tournament, they're built to make a push, in my opinion, Zach.
Yeah, and even further, man, I mean, the crowd that would come out to support this women's team would be unlike a crowd that they've seen any year. If you were to ask me what sport would be to host a postseason game, I probably wouldn't guess women's basketball this year. The first thing that would come to mind is football, but here we are. So it's an opportunity, man. I don't think people realize, playing at home in the playoffs is different. That atmosphere, the feeling, just the environment, it's different. Like every home playoff games, even in professional sport leagues, it's just a different atmosphere. It's a different animal for the opponents that they've been going against. So I think it gives them the upper hand and hopefully can start that momentum, which they can follow in later throughout March and, hopefully through April.
Absolutely. And like Zach said, he's hearing his roommates in the background. I'm in a different setting. If you guys didn't know, I'm back home in Delhi, Louisiana. Shout out to Delhi, Louisiana. Didn't know that's where I'm in the same area that Hayden Federico, freshman standout for Ole Miss
There
baseball.
we
It's around
go.
that same area. So if Hayden
Yeah,
Federico or someone from the Federico family happens to watch this, I'm in your area now. So yeah, if you see my dog walking around here or hear anybody in the background, it's just my family back home seeing them. I'm a senior at Ole Miss, so I'm seeing them one last time before graduation, trying to get some family time in. So just back home here is going to be a fun weekend or a fun couple days here while on spring break. But moving into men's basketball, Zach, this team it's kind of strange. This team, we've said it a couple of times, probably off the air. I don't know if we've said it on the air, but it seems like this team can lose to anybody and also beat anybody. So it's very strange feeling. They just lost the end of the season to Florida. Big blowout there. Don't really want to talk too much about that. I'm sure you guys watched that. Padula had a solid game in that one, but Ole Miss really didn't really have another guy to step up to the incredible shooting that Florida was doing on just all phases of the floor. And it really just didn't turn out the way you wanted it to in the second half. I mean, down 7 at the half, it didn't look bad in the first half, but the second half, it didn't look great. It didn't look great on the defensive end or the offensive end in that first half. But in the game before that, you have a very emotional game against Tennessee. Jamin Brakefield scores 19 in the last 10 minutes. And we've said it all year. Who can be the hero for this Ole Miss team? It's March. It's going to take a little bit of magic. It's going to take more than just Padula scoring 20 a game. It's going to take Brakefield scoring 15. It's going to take Moreth scoring 10 plus, Dre Davis scoring 10 plus, Malik Dia doing what he's capable of doing. It's going to take a collective for this Ole Miss team to get the job done, because I really think it's all based on matchups for this Ole Miss team. They don't match up against bigger teams. They don't match up against teams that have multiple 7-footers or multiple guys who are 6'10 plus. So if you can get in the right bracket in the NCAA tournament, I think Ole Miss can make a run at this thing, Zach.
dude, I've never seen a season like this. For Auburn and Mississippi State, the pavilion is packed out, and you would think, Ole Miss is quite literally a basketball school based on the attendance there. And then we play Oklahoma, and there's not really people there. They're filling in the lower bowl with season ticket holders, and then Tennessee comes in town, and everyone's back to life. All of a sudden, a ranked opponent comes, and because it's Tennessee, everyone's fired up for it. And dude, it paid off. That was one of the best environments I've ever been a part of. So shout out, to the students and to the fans for that. But just a strange year. Struggling to find the words for it because Cam said it best, man. Yeah, Ole Miss can beat Tennessee. Ole Miss can beat Alabama. Ole Miss can smoke Kentucky. But then they could turn around and almost lose to LSU, almost lose to South Carolina. It's really strange. But I will say I do like the draw of the SEC tournament. I believe it's the win. Ole Miss plays the winner of Arkansas and South Carolina. And the reality is, if they win that game, yeah, they have to play Auburn. But your other choices are Tennessee, who you already beat, Alabama, who you already beat, and Florida, who just demolished you. So to me, I would almost want to take the team that beat me twice. It's kind of like, hey, we got nothing to lose type of mindset. But first things first is you got to handle business against Arkansas or South Carolina. So we'll see. I'm fully expecting them to be around the 6, maybe if things go well, a 5 seed, and if things go poorly in the SEC tournament, maybe a 7. But the fact that Ole Miss basketball is back in the mix for the first time since 2019 is awesome. If they can get hot, start, like a guy like Malik Dia, instead of throwing up ridiculous celebrations every time you make a layup, get back on D and keep that hunger throughout the whole game, bro. Like, you're one of the best players on the court. Like, let's keep showing it. Throwing up like guns. Like, what's going, bro? Put your hands down, play some D, and do it again. Do you know what I'm saying? But look, all the potential in the world. It feels like I said it earlier, but very similar to the women's, to the position they're in. Like, this team can go on a damn good run, or they could leave relatively early with their hearts broken. So we're gonna find out, Cam. But where do you kind of see things sliding in with the SEC tournament and ultimately our seeding as well with March Madness?
Absolutely, and like Zach said, Ole Miss seated in that 8 spot for the SEC tournament. We'll have to play Auburn if you win that second round in that second round game between either Arkansas or South Carolina. And there's that second round game's no give me. Like Zach said, I mean, you did put a pretty handled Arkansas well early in the season, but this is a different Arkansas team from early in SEC play. And late in the year, you kind of struggle against South Carolina on the road, so no telling how that game goes if you play them again, because South Carolina believes they can beat Ole Miss, it seems like. So you have to play your best right now. It is March. You have to have someone who's going to make big shots. And I think it's going to take, like Zach said, like Malik Dia to be more consistent, someone like Malik Dia or Jay Davis to be more consistent. And we just haven't seen that consistency all year for them. We've seen consistency from Padula. Yes, he's had his off nights, but Padula's consistently been the best player on this team for Ole Miss. And Breakfield's been probably one of the best 6 men in the year for just across the country, I feel like, coming off the bench. I mean, Chris Beard calls him the 6th starter pretty much because, I mean, he comes on the floor within the first 5 minutes of the game, and it seems like he was already out there because as soon as he gets out there, he's looking to find a bucket. He's looking to make a good pass. Whatever it is, Breakfield's going to be that second guy to Padula. But if you're Ole Miss, you got to find somebody like Malik Dia or Dre Davis to give you 15, 20 a night in these tournaments, because that's what it's going to take. That's what it's going to take if you want to make a deep run. You're going to play a lot of hungry teams. Just because you get in the first round and you play a 10 seed or an 11 seed doesn't mean you're going to beat them. We've seen crazy things happen in March. We've seen the 16 seed win. We've seen the 15 seeds win. I mean, everything crazy that you think can happen happens in this men's basketball tournament every year. Women's basketball, not so much. It seems like the favorites always win those games most of the time. Upsets here and there happen, like Ole Miss a couple years ago with Stanford. But this men's basketball tournament, it's March Madness. That's what it's called. It's going to be crazy. And all it takes is one or two good performances from some guys that you didn't expect to get it from. And I think if Ole Miss can bring some of those guys in and be like, hey, this is it. I mean, a lot of you guys are seniors. Let's go do this thing. Let's go see how far we can get in this tournament. And not only, I mean, not saying Ole Miss can win this tournament, because it's hard to say. It's hard to picture Ole Miss winning the NCAA tournament, especially if you've been an Ole Miss fan for a long time. You understand what I'm saying. But if you can just get to the Sweet 16, that propels this program to a different level. This is year 2 of Chris Beard. And if you can get past the round of 32, that propels this program to another level that it hasn't really been to. And I don't know how long, because I've been watching Ole Miss basketball for a while. And usually when they make the tournament, it's usually bounced out first or second round.
And another thing I'll add here, Cam, is you mentioned, the average age of the team is like maybe 23, old veteran experienced team. But additionally, if you think of the Ole Miss SEC games, just think about all those close finishes, and not even SEC. Let's go back before conference: BYU, which they won; Purdue, which they lost, which they should have won. And then you go into conference. They beat Alabama in a tight game. They beat Tennessee last week in a tight game. LSU, South Carolina, Texas A&M, for example, which they should have won. Ole Miss has figured out how to win in close games. They've also witnessed themselves losing and what it takes to lose those games. So when you combine Chris Beard's, his winning mindset in March, which he does at almost every school, the veteran experience on this team, and just the sheer volume of games that have finished within 1 or 2 points, I do think Ole Miss is they're probably going to have the right mindset. And I think they're going to figure out how to win a couple here, man. I think they're going to surprise some people in March Madness. I don't think they're going to blow anyone out by any means. But to me, in my opinion, Ole Miss, you get them in these close situations within 1 to 2 points, anything can happen against any team in the country. So I am just excited. Last year as a freshman here, I was disappointed that Ole Miss wasn't in the tournament. I understood why, but to be able to watch your team, your college team in the tournament, it's special and it's fun because it's March, man.
Absolutely, and I'll talk a little bit about the seeding before we move into baseball side of things. Ole Miss in the SEC tournament, like we said, eighth seed. If you're watching that, just the way the bracket fell, for the SEC tournament, and you were confused of why Kentucky was at the sixth seed and Ole Miss was below them at the eighth seed. A lot of things go into the way that the SEC tournament is seeded. I mean, going back to the women's one a week ago, Texas beat South Carolina, and they did a coin flip for the one seed. Texas was the number one team in the country, and they did a coin flip for the one seed. And I mean, South Carolina ended up getting the one seed. That's a whole different story. But Ole Miss, the reason why Kentucky is the sixth seed is because Kentucky beat Florida back early in the season, or like middle of SEC play. It was like 100-100 type game. No defense played, and Ole Miss obviously lost to Florida. So that was kind of the tiebreaker that decided things for Ole Miss at the end of the year. Obviously, a lot more goes into that: who you beat, who you lost to. But Ole Miss is the eighth seed. Kentucky at that sixth seed. I think Missouri was at the seventh seed. In the NCAA tournament right now, Lenardi has Ole Miss as a seventh seed. That was on the recent one they had today. And the interesting thing about this is if you win round one, you're matched up against Texas Tech in round two, former team that Beard brought to
It's meant to be.
the Final Four, man. I mean, if that happens, that'll be interesting. We've already seen Beard play his former school in Texas, but if we can play Texas Tech, that's two schools in the same year that Beard coached that you'll be playing against. So that'll be an interesting thing if Ole Miss ends up matching up against Texas Tech in the NCAA tourney. But like Zach said, the ceiling right now is the 5 seed for Ole Miss. I mean, you got teams like Louisville and Kentucky ahead of Ole Miss in the brackets that Lenardi has been putting out. Kind of confusing there considering the resumes for both those
Yeah.
teams. Ole Miss sitting 28th in the net. Louisville, obviously, a complete different team, just like Arkansas when Ole Miss beat them by 20 on their own floor. But I still believe Ole Miss can beat Louisville today, and I still think Ole Miss is deserving of a 5 or 6 spot, especially with the teams that they beat this year. So we'll have to see how it goes in the SEC tourney. Zach will be there. I believe that starts on Wednesday. Ole Miss, I think, will play on Thursday against the winner of that Arky South Carolina game. So we'll have to see what that matchup goes to. Zach will have some coverage for you guys, some videos and tweets and stuff from there. And we'll have to see how they fare in the SEC tourney. And then we'll talk about the Selection Sunday show probably next weekend when we get on with you guys to talk really men's and women's basketball for the selection show. I think that's all we got for basketball for today. That moves us into baseball. It's been an interesting couple of weeks for baseball. And I think the question for me, Zach, is this team back to elite status? Is Ole Miss trying to become an elite program again?
Dude, it's such a good question. And I've tried to refrain myself from really coming to any conclusions, but the fact of the matter is, I'm pretty sure this is their best start since the 2020 season. So hopefully, no new virus starts and shuts the world down just like it did that year. But it seems like most of the pieces are in play, man, and it starts on the mound. Hunter Elliott, Riley Maddox, and Mason Nichols have done a really good job today. Nichols, he's touching 95 in the third inning, Cam. To me, that's a great sign from your Sunday guy. Because typically, last year, this is not a disrespect. Like, I love Grayson Sonia and his family, but he was super inconsistent as an Ole Miss Rebel, especially wearing powdered blue on Sundays. You didn't really know what version you were going to get. You have a guy in Mason Nichols who's proven himself. He's an Ole Miss guy. He lives and dies by the Rebs, and he can legitimately play. He's developed into an elite starting pitcher. So I think it's great to have that on the back end. And then I want to talk about this transfer outfield, Cam. Ryan Mowerman, Isaac Humphrey, and Mitch Sanford all come from different walks of life. Humphrey from the ACC, Mowerman from the Big Ten, Sanford, who I think he was at New Orleans, which is not a Power 5 school. And these dudes are showing out. Not only do they have rockets attached to their body, because they're throwing some missiles across the diamond. If you watch warm-ups or you watch them, throw to their cutoff men, but they're just raking. Like, go watch these kids hit, man. They have deep at bats always. They see the ball super well at the plate, and their bat playing is smooth. It's free sailing, and they got some pop, man. I'm pretty sure they combined for, I want to say 10 or 11 home runs, and they're almost all hitting 300. Obviously, Mowerman's hitting like 380 something. But these dudes, I feel like this is the first set of evaluations for Mike Bianco that we can confidently say yeah, these were elite transfer pickups. Sometimes it does work out, McPhee-McCuin, Trace, and Hughes from last year's team, but three starters who you have no idea how they're going to play are coming in and being some dogs. Now, the thing I'll leave with you, Cam, which I'd like you to elaborate on, you've been watching Ole Miss baseball forever, but SEC play starts. Who's going to rise up? Who's going to fall? And how much are we going to find out about this Ole Miss team, man? I'm very curious heading into next weekend.
Absolutely, and I think we're gonna find out a lot about this Ole Miss team this weekend. Everyone is excited about these Rebels right now on a 13-game win streak. Haven't lost since that second game in Arlington when you lost to Texas. And we've talked about that in the media booth. We talked about that just together, Zach. Is that game a fluke? We don't know yet. We're yet to see if that game was a fluke. They got shut out by Luke Harrison, the really only SEC guy that they faced this year. I mean, you faced a pretty good guy on Friday night for Jacksonville State with Stephen Cash, who was kind of shutting Ole Miss down for a little while there and until an emotional sixth inning where you had 3 home runs. And I'll talk about that in a little bit too. But I think you're going to find out a lot about this weekend because you're facing a really good Arkansas team batting 320 as a team. They have 3 guys who are going to start this weekend who could all shut out Ole Miss. And you got 3 guys on their team batting 400. You got 3 guys on their team with 5+ home runs. They're going to swing it well this weekend. They're going to pitch it well this weekend. I think if you're Ole Miss, the big thing for me this weekend is, yes, you want to go win this series, but it's Arkansas. You haven't had great success against Arkansas outside of that College World Series run when you beat them twice in that College World Series. But you haven't had great success against a really powerful Arkansas program in baseball. If you can just go in here and be competitive all weekend and not get swept this weekend, I think Ole Miss can say that they're back on the way up. Like Zach said, the transfers have been performing at the top of their game right now. Ole Miss has a lot of newcomers and freshmen performing at the top of their game right now. And I think the ceiling is very high for this Ole Miss team. I think the floor is also very low for this Ole Miss team. We've seen how bad it can get when this team lays down in the past 2 seasons. And that brings me into what I was saying is I don't think this team likes to lay down. I mean, this past couple games, we've seen Ole Miss. We've seen a gritty Ole Miss team this past weekend at Jacksonville State and the midweek against Murray State. It seems like these newcomers bring a very emotional style of baseball to play. And there's my dog in the background, like I told you guys. But yeah, it seems like this Ole Miss team brings a very emotional style of play to the game. They fed off of Mike Bianco in that 6th inning in game 1, where they just kind of erupted on the umpire, and umpire was making some bad calls. Jacksonville State's chatting back at him, and all of a sudden, Foley hits a bomb out the center. Will Furnace gets up there and hits a missile out into the student section, slams the bat, and then Federico comes up and hits a no-doubt home run, and bat flips the bat 20 feet in the air. I mean, this is I haven't seen this type of emotion out of an Ole Miss team back since they won the College World Series. It seems like they got what it takes to be a gritty baseball team and get some gritty wins. And I think we're going to find out a lot about this Arkansas series when it comes to town, because I mean, some elite pitchers, some elite hitters on this Arkansas team.
The word that comes to mind is just dirtbags, Cam. These kids are ball players. They're gritty. They just want to go out there and compete. In Federico, I just can't say enough about him. His at-bats are so disciplined. And, even though he's not getting 4 hits a game like he was early in the season, every at-bat, it feels like he's in there competing. And when he's grounding out, it's a hard ground ball. When he's flying out, it's a competitive AB, like I said. But kid's legit. And watching him, flip that bat and point to the Rebels on his jersey, it's tough, man. We haven't seen that in a couple of years now. So very exciting. But let's talk about Arkansas a little. Cam and I were talking about it before the podcast. No disrespect, we're not going to attempt to say these guys' first names, but the LA brothers, one of them plays shortstop. One of them, they move him around, but he DHs a lot for the most part. They're both hitting over 400 and both have 6 home runs. So that's the first thing you got to circle, man. If I'm Hunter Elliott, I'm like, okay, Aloy brothers, maybe, we don't throw as many pitches in the zone because these boys are going to mash. Like, they are single-handedly taking that Arkansas batting average from like 280 to 320 just between them two. One of them's hitting over 500. Like, what? That is unheard of. You just look at the fashion of which the Razorbacks are winning these games, dude. It's dominant. It's dominant. It's winning by 10. It's winning by, I think they won by like 17 the other day. Their only loss is against Kansas State, a very competitive Kansas State team. I think that was in the same tournament that Ole Miss went to just the week after them. But they've been great. Wins over TCU, couple other great programs, and here we are, man. We're gonna find out a lot. But I will say, Rebel Nation's gonna be fired up. I should be back. Cam will obviously be there, and Swayze. It's gonna have a vibe to it, which it hasn't had in a long time. I only got to watch this on YouTube because I clearly wasn't at Ole Miss. I was actually in high school, but I feel like this is going to give vibes of when Louisville came to town for that opening weekend. I think in 2020, and I'm watching that video. So it first introduced me to Ole Miss, and I'm watching the beer showers and the passion of Chatinier and I think Servideo playing short, but just some dogs out there, and that's the vibes I get, and I feel like we're gonna get that similar feeling this weekend. So I'm fired up, man.
Absolutely. And like Zach said, with those guys at the plate for Arkansas, going to be a tough showing for the Rebel pitchers this weekend. Hunter Elliott didn't have the best outing against Jacksonville State on Friday. Bianco said after the game that he'd been battling a little bit of sickness throughout the week, maybe a little bit of flu symptoms. I think he called it like the mucus or something like that. I think what Bianco said, just messing with them. Had the velo down for Elliott a little bit. He walked 4, hit 3. Just wasn't a Hunter Elliott type game that we saw. I believe Hunter Elliott pitched in one of those games against Arkansas back in the College World Series. So this is a team that has seen that. This is a coach that's seen Hunter Elliott before, a program that's seen Hunter Elliott before. But hopefully he'll be back to his normal form on Friday. Maddox looked pretty good in his start on Saturday. Went 5 innings. I think for like the 3rd or 4th consecutive game, he went 5 innings since getting beat up pretty bad in that Texas game, in that second game of the year. And then like Zach said today, Nichols looked great on the mound today with McCausland coming right behind him. And Mason Morris looked great on Friday coming in for Hunter Elliott. He was hitting 97 at times, 98 a couple times on there on the radar gun. And Mason Morris has really stepped up his game on the mound for Ole Miss, seeming to be that really just bullpen guy that you're going to rely on, whether it's on Friday or Saturday. You're going to bring him out of the pen first, hoping that you can shut out the rest of the game behind someone like Elliott or Maddox. That brings me to the Arkansas pitchers, though. Their Saturday, their Friday guy is going to be Gabe Geichel. He was a freshman last year for Arkansas. Highly touted guy coming into the season. Hasn't been a great start for him this year. I think he has a 6 ERA so far this year, but he's got great command. He's going to bring the fastball. He's going to bring the breaking ball, and Ole Miss is going to have their hands full on Friday. And then on Saturday, you're going to still have your hands full with Zach Root, who's looked outstanding this year. I think he's got like 30 strikeouts and like 3 or 4 walks this year. He's looking great for Arkansas right now. And then Beldashai's on Sunday, and he's looking great right now for Arkansas too. I haven't really seen him pitch much, but as far as the statistics, he's looking pretty great right now for Arkansas. So you're going to place 3 starters this weekend that can all shut down Ole Miss. And I think the big question is what is the bottom half of that lineup going to do? They've been looking great for Ole Miss so far in these recent games. Guys like Furness, Pano, Foley kind of settling in behind the plate there at catcher. They've been looking great. I mean, I think Furness put his batting average over 200 this weekend. Same with Foley. I think Pano put his batting average over 200 today. Batting average is starting to come along a little bit better for the bottom half of that lineup. Obviously, like Zach said earlier, the top half of that lineup has been raking. I think the question really is for Ole Miss is, what is Judd Utermark going to do in SEC play? He's looked elite at times in non-conference play, and at times he shows you that, I mean, he's still swinging at some bad pitches. Yes, he's a big power guy, and you're going to have to deal with the strikeouts because he's going to take swings where he's swinging out of his shoes and trying to hit a ball 450 feet out of the ballpark. But if he's going to hit 15-plus home runs this year for Ole Miss, I think that's the goal that you're set at. I think he's got 8 right now. Mormon hit his 6th home run today. I think he hit 2 today, right, Zach?
Oh yeah.
So Mormon had a great weekend. I know you said 380. I think he put his batting average over 400 today, passing Luke Hill for the top batting average on the team. Obviously, Federico's kind of ticked down a little bit as the season has went on, but like Zach said, still some quality at-bats for Federico. Doesn't really strike out a lot. I think he's got 2 strikeouts on the year, and those came in the recent couple games for Federico. So this Ole Miss team, they can swing it. They can pitch it a little. I think the question is how good are you going to be when it comes down to that 2-1 game, 3-1 game, and you need someone to prevail. You need a pitcher to be the guy. You need a couple hitters to be the guy. What's going to happen? Ole Miss has kind of been showing it these past couple weeks is when you're down by a couple or you're down by like 4 or 5, Ole Miss is showing fight. They're showing that they can come back into these games and not going to give up. And you're not going to be able to do that with SEC teams, though. You're going to have to start early and start hot against these SEC teams, because if you get down 5-0, 4-0 against one of these SEC teams, especially Arkansas this coming up weekend, it could look pretty bad by the end of the weekend.
That's another huge thing, Cam. The top of the lineup's got to stay hot. You mentioned the bottom, and one of those questions for me is shortstop. who is Mike Bianco going to roll out? So I said it before the show, but it feels like we're getting very similar production defensively and offensively from Chang and Pano. And just based off, the different level of ceilings that they have, I would almost opt with Pano because it feels like he's a guy who could break out at any moment. He's a guy who can hit a 400-foot homer out of the Swayze Stadium, or he can rope a base hit or get a bunt down. I'll also say we have seen Luke Cheng lay down a couple of beautiful bunts this year. We've seen Braden Randall do it today. So those guys coming off the bench, it's vital, and they got to be ready to go. But because of all those different reasons, I would like to see Pano get 2 of the 3 starts. Obviously, they're going to throw in Chang for one of them. In a similar situation going on behind the dish at catcher, too. I'd like to see Austin Foley get 2 of those 3 starts. It's not a disrespect to Smithwick, but you got to play the hot bat. And Foley's got some pop, man. He's got 4 homers. He's really, really efficient behind the dish. Strong arm, throwing guys out. And he brings the juice. He's an emotional guy. We talked about it. But, when Ole Miss is battling the umpire on Friday night against Jacksonville State, Foley gets up there, deep breath, hits an absolute moonshot, puts Ole Miss ahead, kind of starts that rally. So for me, and all those reasons, those need to be your guys moving forward. But Ole Miss does have a game against, I think, want to say South Alabama this week before we even get there. So we'll see what happens then. But yeah, Friday at 6:30, be it Swayze. That's all I got to say.
Absolutely. And it's probably going to be a top 15 matchup with Ole Miss coming off 13 consecutive wins. Probably they'll get pushed into the top 15 this week, being at number 17 coming into the weekend. If they can handle business at South Alabama, that'll be 14 straight wins going into that Arkansas series. So it should be a really exciting weekend. I know the Ole Miss fans, especially the students, will be back from spring break, most of them, and we'll be out there in the outfield with hopefully some beer showers to come out there in the outfield. But like Zach said, the bottom half of that lineup is going to have to keep producing. The top half of that lineup is going to have to keep doing what they've been doing, keep raking, keep getting on base to let the bottom half of that lineup be encouraged and still push them in for runs. And this Ole Miss pitching staff, they looked solid this year so far, better than they have the past 2 seasons, with Joel Mangrum at the helm really calling pitches and getting everybody out there that he can. It seems like Ole Miss has found their guys on the bump, and you'll see this weekend when you don't see some names that you've been seeing coming out there anymore. You'll probably see only a set few guys, as long as there are no blowout games, obviously. But you'll see some set few guys this weekend, and those are the guys that Ole Miss are going to run with. Seems like they found their lineup this weekend. Obviously, like Zach said, you probably want to see Pano at that shortstop spot a little bit more, but it seems like Foley's made his way behind the dish permanently. Smithwick will probably give him some relief at some points. But it seems like Bianco's kind of found his lineup, and I think it's a pretty good lineup right now. And I think if you win this weekend, if you can get to this weekend against Arkansas, that's great. If you can sweep, that's even better. And heading in the SEC play, there's a lot of questions to answer, Zach. We've been saying it this whole time. You don't really know where this Ole Miss baseball team is at right now. It's hard to say. But we'll find out a lot of questions this weekend. Is that all you got, Zach?
Real quick, Cam, I honestly think Ole Miss is going to notch off 2 games this weekend. This is probably me just being a delusional fan, but I think the fellas have proved it a little bit, and being at home, I'm hoping we can kind of carry that motivation with us. But I wanted to see what you had.
Yeah, I think Ole Miss will get 1 at least. I think 2 is definitely a plus. I think you get 1 at least. I think there's going to be some competitive baseball games this weekend that are going to come down to the last couple of outs. Maybe one swing decides the game. Who's that one swing going to be? Is it going to be Utermark? Is it going to be Mormon? Is it going to be one of the other transfer outfielders? Is it going to be the freshman Federico? There's going to be one guy that changes the game, whether it's in all 3 games, 1 game, or 2 games this weekend. Ole Miss is going to need a game changer this weekend at some point. So we're going to have to see how that goes on this weekend. I think that's all we got for you guys for baseball and basketball today. We'll get back to you guys in the midweek. I'll be back in Oxford on Tuesday, and we'll try to get either to y'all that night or on Wednesday with another positional group feature pod. We'll go in the linebackers this week. If you missed it, go back and look at the DB one. That's the one with the Jalen Braxton headline for Ole Miss. We just highlighted the DB room. It'll probably be a little bit shorter of a podcast this midweek with the linebacker room. Not a lot of linebackers. We'll probably try to talk a little bit about some of the outside linebackers that could be playing D-line in this Pete Golden defense. Guys like Suntarine Perkins. So we'll get to that in the midweek. We'll see you guys later on the weekend after the Arkansas series. We'll recap the Arkansas series, and we'll get to talk a little bit about Selection Sunday. That'll be next Sunday for Ole Miss basketball, women's and men's. So we'll get to talk about that and see where they fare in both those tourneys coming up. I think that's all we got for you guys today, though. Make sure to tune in to the rebelwalk.com to check out any of our articles, any of our content. Make sure to leave a like and comment to this YouTube channel. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Subscribe to me and Zach on social media. Subscribe to the Rebel Walk on social media. And with that being said, thanks for tuning in, guys, and check out the Rebel Walk for all your Ole Miss sports needs.